Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
Good morning, everybody. We should be on. Are we, though? Hey, Chris. Hey, Martin. Looks like we are. This doesn't seem to know it on all of the apps yet. Mildly disturbing. Hey, Ann. Hey, Ann, how you doing? I heard there was a fire near you. Hey, Ellen. Hey, Dina. Hey, Dad. Hey, Eric. Hey, Darlene, Lisa, Karen, Susan, Tom, Wendy. Hey, Lucian. Hey, Bruce.
In the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago.
Hey, Laura. Hey, Becky.
Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Sky.
Hey, Barbara, Georgia. I hope it's working for everybody. Can anybody see if this is running on... Okay, looks like it's running on YouTube. Hey, no one. Hey, Octavio. Hey, James. Hey, Roy. Don't know if it's on Twitch yet. Hey, Beth. Hey, Heather. Jennifer. Andrea. Bridget. Hey, Toby. This is one of those days when it's just going to give me trouble. Hey, Joseph. Today we're talking about swindlers and gamblers and con artists. Oh my. Hey Betsy, hey Benny. Hey Jordana, hope you're feeling better. And hey Miles. Hey Todd, hey Phil. Alright, looks like it's running on every app. I'm getting comments from all the apps, so, okay. Hey Diane. Hey Heather, Susan. Hey, Carlene, welcome around. Hey, Kathy. Heather, I hope none of your ancestors, Carlene, I hope none of your ancestors show up on this particular tour. Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for checking, Jordana. Hey, Linda. Hey, Casey. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Diane. You know, sometimes when I'm talking about bad people from Chicago history, of which we have so many, and there's so much more entertaining to talk about, some people get, if it's somebody's distant relatives or something, they might get really mad. That's known to happen sometimes. Hey, Mona. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Ben. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Carlene. Well, yeah, Carlene, that doesn't necessarily help. Chicago police right now have probably the best reputation they ever did. Which isn't saying much. They don't have that great of a reputation now. But throughout history, they've been, you know... We'll be talking a bit about Chicago police today. They were in league with the con artists and the gamblers and the payoff men. Part of the reason these swindlers got away with so much is... Oh, and I should have this on the proper thing here. Here we go. Part of the reason they got away with so much for so long is they were paying off the cops. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Larry. Hey, Judy. Good morning all around. Kathleen, I would agree. It's not my fault they were dodgy. Some people seem to think it is. Linda, yeah, we got some ice last night. Like a thin coating. My car's got that, like, nice, glossy coating of ice on it right now. Hey, Martin, I should make it one. Mama would dance for the money they'd throw. Hey, Dim, hey, Kimberly. Cindy, we get a lot of that here, too. It's almost, I have trouble doing Al Capone tours. Everybody thinks that their relatives were in the Capone gang. Occasionally, it might be true. Hey, Caesar in Poland. Welcome along. Heather, I drove back from Indiana yesterday, too. In fact, yesterday was one of my favorite morning mini-tours we ever did, starting in that cemetery in Lafayette and then proceeding to the boyhood home of Axl Rose, which is just like you would picture it. Plus, a guy rode up on a unicycle and dabbed, even though it's 2022. Man, I absolutely loved the Axl Rose tour yesterday. Perhaps that cemetery was the warm, safe place where, as a child, he'd hide and pray for the thunder and the rain to quietly pass him by. I can definitely picture somebody's hair reminding him of that cemetery, especially if her hair smelled like fries. The whole place kind of smelled like, well, fish sticks. It smelled like a Long John Silver's in that cemetery. Thanks, paternal partner. This ice skating in the cemetery is probably not recommended. I wouldn't have a problem with it. Welcome along. Hey everybody, I'm gonna go adjust this curtain a bit. With all my heart. Hey Art, hey Laura. Hey Lee. Dabbing was really cool for about 3 weeks. But I got some news. Anyway, the Police Gazette, which has nothing to do with the police, it's just like Victorian version of Maxim, is now on archive.org, like 1,400 issues. So if you guys need me, that's where I'll be for a long time to come. Really not a reliable source, but really an entertaining source, and also a good icebreaker. It points the way to better to interesting cases.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of
Best of luck, Julie.
Jenny Walk.
Hey Rebecca, hey Tony, hey Robert. Welcome along, Alessandra. Heather, that's entirely possible. Hey, Karen. Well, look who's come to say hi. Here's Miles, everybody. Those of you new around here, there is a whole Facebook group called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and the Miles Fan Club. This is Miles. He's been driving me nuts all morning, hasn't he? Even when I was trying to make coffee, he just wouldn't leave me alone. But we'll get out the toy after in the post-show hang. You know that. Thanks, Kim. Hey, Georgia. Hey, Patty. Hey, Steve. Good morning, Mom. You missed me singing Cher already. Morning, Scott. Hey, Ellen. Miles is really quite eager. Yeah, Kristen, I'm not sure what to make of that unicyclist either. I mean, what a random thing. It's like, the street where Axl Rose grew up is a bunch of houses with broken windows covered by flags and private property signs. I didn't show you guys the one with it's full of Batman memorabilia in the front yard. On the corner is a farm supply store / deli. Then a giant billboard for a psychic. This is like where rock stars want you to think they came from. Where they really came from the suburbs. Hey, Grandma Belle. Hey, Kelly. About 20 years ago, I had a song that I used to play in coffee shops and bars called Axl Rose Must Die, which was not really criticizing Axl so much as the fact that if he had died in 1994, he would have been the biggest rock star ever. And instead, in the early 2000s, when he had been out of action for years, he was kind of a joke. But now I got to change my mind. My favorite character of the last several years has been woke Axl Rose on Twitter. I mean, Axl had some rough periods. Putting out songs like 1 in a Million just because everybody told him he shouldn't. But now he's a woke character on Twitter. It's proof that a man can get better. Hey, Judy. Hey, Luann. We'll give Benny Goodman another minute or so here while people keep logging on.
Just in the same vein, Rosetta.
Hey, Carol. And that cemetery by Axel's house is fantastic, too. There's a lot to find in there, I think. Well, Kristen, you could argue 91, but that was still before Use Your Illusion. Now, the theory that Nevermind immediately killed heavy metal, it was a slower death than that. Now, of course, Patty, if my car had broken down at his house and then I'd lost my phone or something, then I might have to be blaming a lot of stuff on Axel. But him still being alive, it's not, not as much fun as blaming everything on Pullman. Hey, Rob. Hey, Brian. Morning, Christine. Morning, Bob. We're giving everybody a couple minutes to log on, just because people tend to show up right at 10. So I'll give it a minute or so. I don't think I'm getting any angry letters from tech support people. No, alright. Mail program is closing down, so it's too late now. Hey, Lana. Hey, Lisa. Got my Rockstar coffee mug, just like the ones they had at Apple Studios. Hey, Sherry. Hey, Jen. Morning, Sherry, Mary, Brad, Lana. Might have missed some people here. We'll let Benny Goodman finish off this song, and then we'll get started properly. Some stuff in my throat just won't clear out, you know. Hey, Sherry.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman's arrangement, Paul Ragg.
All right. Benny having wrapped up, just give me 1 second to clear my throat here. All right, and with that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to Mysterious Chicago once again. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, the brand new Murder Maps USA from Thames and Hudson, and coming this summer from University of Illinois Press, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. This is maybe the book I am most proud of. I'm spending the next week working on the index, which is going to be tedious and a half. But, you know, I want this to be the best book it possibly can be. You know, I hear at some of the big publishers, they pay for somebody else to do the indexing. That's never been my experience. Except for once when I did the Smart Alex Guide to American History about 15 years ago. They actually had somebody else do the index. That was nice. But that kind of thing just, you know, publishing has gotten a little bit stingier over the last several years. So, welcome along, everybody. I've also talked about this kind of things on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, all kinds of channels. So I am, in fact, incredibly famous. And you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. But today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, swindlers, gamblers, and con artists in Chicago history. Now, there's any number of things that we can talk about where it's just one interesting character after another. In the case of swindlers, gamblers, and con artists, not only are these guys fascinating, but it's one of the most entertaining things that you can't really take a word of this seriously. A lot of this stuff comes from primary sources. A lot of the stuff comes from interviews they gave to newspapers, memoirs that they wrote by themselves. But you got to keep in mind, these guys are swindlers and con artists, whether they're exactly true or not. Just for instance, one of the most popular guys on this tour is a guy who in 1940 and again in the 1950s walked in to the old Chicago Sun-Times building, which is the one coming up over here with the columns down at the bottom by Hollibird and Root. one of our great Art Deco buildings, and still by far the best building the Chicago Sun-Times ever had. Like later on they built this thing, and then replaced it with this thing, which is now painted dark blue and frankly looks a whole lot better than it did before. But both of those tended to win contests for ugliest building on the river. This one really looked pretty good. But once again, about the 1940s and again in the 50s, a guy by the name of Joseph Weil, known as Yellow Kid Weil, came walking into this place to give interviews, once with some anonymous reporter, and then in 1956 with Saul Bellow, who I believe went on to win the Nobel Prize. At least it said he did on The Simpsons. But Yellow Kid had just written, or had ghost-written, an autobiography called Yellow Kid Weil, the autobiography of America's master swindler. Now, the Yellow Kid, by this point, had been pulling every con scheme imaginable, going back to his days as a very young man. I don't know, I'd be stunned if that was really a picture of him as a baby or anything like that. But his nickname apparently came from the Yellow Kid, a comic strip that ran in William Randolph Hearst papers, which is also sometimes said to be the origin of the phrase yellow journalism. There's a lot of things Yellow Kid is credited with that I don't think are exactly true. I mean, even before Yellow Kid's comics started running, you can find other newspapers referring Hearst to that yellow book. Oh, great, I'm getting texts about Wordle. That won't bother me at all. Now, exactly who gave him the nickname of the Yellow Kid is also a little bit up in the air. In 1940, he said that it came from Hinky Dink Kenna, one of the two notorious First Ward aldermen. But then in 1956, he said it came from Bathhouse John, the other notorious First Ward alderman. You really can't necessarily believe much of what this guy says. But according to his autobiography, he got his start. I'm going to turn on the volume so you stop hearing dings about Wordle coming in. He got his start working for medicine shows. These were the classic guys who would go around with... often with bands, often with whole dancers and whole routines, trying to sell medicines that generally were not known to work. Among them, things like Clark Stanley's snake oil. You still hear things referred to as snake oil quite a bit. Or perhaps more famous in its day was Hamlin's wizard oil. People would go out and make you a really good presentation about how all of these oils would cure whatever ailed you, just trying to sell you some. And usually by the time you found out it didn't really work, they were clear off in another town someplace. Now, according to Yellow Kid's autobiography, he got his start working with a guy named Doc Merriweather, running things called for a tapeworm cure. Now, you often hear that back in those days it was a common diet remedy that people would take tapeworm pills to help them lose weight. Whether that's true or not is one of those things that's kind of in dispute, but definitely it was easy to convince people that if they had stomach problems, perhaps the culprit was a tapeworm. So Doc Merriweather had mixed up some kind of elixir that was really just, things you find around the house, but also containing some strong laxatives, and started running medicine shows around Wisconsin. This isn't an actual picture of him, this is just a picture of what it would have looked like. And the scam was he would roll into town, gather up a crowd, and tell people, so you see, this stuff will cure you of your tapeworm. In fact, if anybody here has stomach problems, can I get a volunteer? And he would bring a volunteer up and have the guy down a bottle of this stuff, then stand behind a curtain to poop into a basin. At this point, a Confederate would come out and hold up a basin, not the same basin, a different basin. They had done the old poop basin switcheroo, and pull out a potato peel from inside of it, presumably with tongs. And Doc Merriweather would hold it up and say, "Here's your tapeworm, sir. Evil-looking thing, isn't it?" Now, Yellow Kid had a couple of jobs in this. One is that working with Doc Merriweather, he would previously prepare the tapeworm. It would be really just a long potato peel. And also sometimes he was probably the guy charged with swapping out the basins. But really he would stand in the crowd and come up and say, "Sir, I bought a bottle of your elixir just last year and it cured me of a tapeworm immediately. I would now like to buy 10 bottles. Just to help build up the crowd. Now, his story of this is pretty lurid. He talks about it quite a bit in his autobiography, and now Doc Merriweather occasionally makes it onto the lists of the top 10 swindlers of all time. This despite the fact that, as near as I can tell, Yellow Kid's autobiography is the only evidence that Doc Merriweather ever even existed. Most likely he made the whole thing up. He is still swindling people from beyond the grave. All right. That is a good question I see in the comments. If it cured him, why didn't he need to buy 10 more bottles? How many tapeworms was this guy getting anyway? But we're going to move back a little bit further in history. We're going to go to some of Chicago's first swindlers and con artists going way back to the 1840s. Now, this is Lake Street as it appears today. A street now going underneath the L tracks, which kind of hurt it business-wise. But back in the 1860s, this is where everybody was. I just read an account of a fire there in 1849, and all the names that come up, H.O. Stone, Ira Couch, M.O. Walker. It's like, I know all these guys. These guys are all on my cemetery tours. But somewhere down this block on Lake Street near Clark in the 1840s was the Chicago Museum. There is very little data out there about what the Chicago Museum was like in 1848. I've had the devil's own time trying to figure out exactly where it was, what they would have had on display. I've really got no idea. But we do know that one of the proprietors of it was a guy by the name of David Kennison. David Kennison told everybody who would listen that he was over 100 years old and was the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party. 1848, about the best data we've got on the museum, is he wrote a letter to a newspaper saying, I have taken the museum in this city, which I was obliged to do in order to get a comfortable living, as my pension is so small it scarcely affords the comforts of life. If I live until the 17th of November, I shall be 112 years old, and I intend making a donation party on that day at the museum. I have fought in several battles for my country. Now, all I can ask of this generous public is to call at the museum on the 17th day of November, my birthday, and donate to me all they may think I deserve. I shall be happy to have all the traveling community call and see me at all times. So for a while, this was a historian, I would have just loved this. You could just go to the museum and go hang out with David Kennison in exchange for donations. Not unlike what you're doing with me right now. So Kennison told everybody that he was the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party. This made the news quite a bit, partly because he was in the habit of showing up at anti-slavery meetings. Like here's in 1848, he showed up at a Free Soil meeting, made a big speech closing with the words, "Make your country free and abolish slavery." 1848, there was an article in the Buffalo talking about the same basic thing. Stood up and spoke for 10 or 15 minutes. Now, honestly, I have to imagine that people must have known on some level that this guy was probably not really 112 years old. In fact, he was absolutely lying through his teeth about the whole thing. There are historians who've come to the conclusion after looking him up that he might have actually seen some service in the Revolutionary War. His pension file says otherwise. There's this note in here that essentially says, don't listen to a word that this guy says. 1814, he said he was 42 years old. 1818, he said he was 56. 1820, he had gotten up to 79. So in the course of 6 years, he apparently aged 37 years. No uninteresting trick. And really, I just think people had to know it. But hey, he was using his powers as a swindler for a good cause in fighting against slavery. And they liked having a Revolutionary War soldier in town. We still do. In fact, we've got this memorial boulder that was set up where they thought his burial place might have been. That was his burial place according to a guy by the name of Fernando Jones, who was a bit of a big talker himself in early Chicago. And Kennison gave him this little vial of tea leaves that he said were from the Boston Tea Party. He gave that to Jones. Jones gave that to the Historical Society. They still got him, even though they are of no illusion to the fact that this guy was absolutely lying through his teeth. This was just some ordinary tea, in all likelihood. But he's one of fairly few swindlers who really used his powers for good, unless you believe I believe it was P.T. Barnum who said it is morally wrong to let suckers keep their money. It is also sometimes said, but there's a lot of P.T. Barnum quotes that turn out to be by somebody else. But we're also talking about gamblers today. It's difficult to realize just what a big deal gambling was in 19th century Chicago. It seems like almost every business had a little gambling den in the back. But there was also entire places such as you could always go to get yourself a nice card game going. Over on places like this section of Randolph Street today was in the 1880s known as Hair Trigger Block. This is where all of the biggest gambling parlors of the day operated, the biggest and most open ones. back in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. In the days before the Great Chicago Fire, one of the biggest guys operating on Hair Trigger Block, which looked about like this at the time, was a guy by the name of George Trussell. Now, he ran a gambling parlor, was also a regular in all of the other gambling parlors. It amassed a huge estate. People were kind of enchanted by what a romantic figure this was. And eventually he met a young woman by the name of Molly. They seem to have been married in a not entirely legal ceremony, but she started calling herself Molly Trussell, and eventually became the subject of a book called Queen of the Demimonde, Gay Life in Chicago, a very early Chicago true crime book. But one day she found out that she was not the only woman in George's life, so she got herself all dressed up and went to see him where she knew she would find him at Seneca Wright's Saloon and Gambling Parlor, which was right where the Ford Center for the Performing Arts Nederlander Theater is now. She walked inside of this place, said, "Where's George?" And while a guy was standing there singing the Limerick Races, an Irish drinking song, she walked up right while the crowd was loudest and shot George in the chest. He stumbled out back into what is sometimes called the Alley of Death and Mutilation. This is also the alley behind where the Iroquois Theater was in 1903, where during a fire there, the pile of bodies here got to be about 6 feet high. Because of that, it's a popular stop on ghost tours, but you always have to wonder, making the broad assumption that the ghosts are real, maybe the ghost people are seeing here isn't the ghost of the Iroquois Theater at all. Maybe it is the ghost of George Trussell, still floating around the place, having died right here where the alley now stands. Molly, for her part, was eventually pardoned. She was convicted, but only served a very short couple of weeks in jail. And later even came back and gave a couple of interviews. Rumor has it that she was killed at a Denver dance hall brawl, but it's very difficult to tell for sure. But by the 1870s, gambling operations in the city were largely run by a guy by the name of Mike McDonald. Now, Mike McDonald operated a place called The Store over by Clark and Monroe, and he had been at this for a really long time. Some people say that he was the inventor of what was called the soap scam. The idea of the soap scam is back when he was a kid working on the trains, he would sell bars of soap, but before that he would show everybody that a couple of the bars of soap randomly had dollar bills inserted inside, and some of them even had a $100 bill inserted inside. So as he started to sell the bars of soap and people opened them up and did not find the $100 bill, they would get down to the last few and he would say, "All right, we're going to raise the prices now. Who would pay $10 for this bar of soap that has a 1 in 3 chance of having a $100 bill inside of it?" And would make himself quite a lot of money, but of course he had already sold the $100 bill one to a friend who would run off with it and would give it back to him later on. Now, he came to Chicago, started a lot of gambling operations, made quite a bit, is sometimes said to be the real source of the phrase, "there's a sucker born every minute." It's one of a number of epigrams attributed to him that may or may not be legal. Like there was at one point a person came to one of his places and said, "We're soliciting money for a charity. We need to bury a policeman who's died." And George gave him $10 and said, "Here, bury 5 of them." But in the 1870s, he was starting to help mayors get into office, and from then became kind of the power behind a throne for a good decade or so. At one point, he was running what was known as the Boodle Board. The Boodle Board was a board of county directors who were notoriously on the take. In fact, there was one point when they built the new courthouse in 1872, they got worried that it wasn't going to last that long. You know, stone wasn't doing that great. In fact, they did tear it down in 1892. This is how it looks today. Originally, it looked about like this. And realizing that they might be running out of money with this sort of thing, McDonald engaged a guy by the name of Henry Holland. Now, Henry Holland was the proprietor of some stuff called the Lundberg Stone Preserving Process. And this was supposed to be a kind of paint/putty that you could put over a building that would help preserve it for decades and decades. Now, he initially quoted the county. He said, "You know what? I will give you, I will take care of this for a mere $40,000. Then when he was done, he presented them with a bill for $137,000. And the board wouldn't pay. It took them like 20 years to settle this case, and eventually they did pay him off, even though by then they had established this was just paint mixed with linseed oil. It didn't do anything to preserve the buildings whatsoever. W. Boyington, who designed these gates, testified at the trial that the process didn't work. William LeBaron Jenney, who built the home insurance building, the first modern skyscraper, said he had bought it and was completely overcharged by it. Now, around this time, so many of these gamblers were getting away with stuff. So many of these con artists were getting away with stuff because in his position, Mike McDonald was taking a lot of payoffs from criminals. He was arranging payoffs to the police. So if a pickpocket got in trouble, Mike McDonald could just go to his pool of witnesses and have these guys come in court and say, nope, he was with me last night. He couldn't have been the pickpocket. After one particular guy got scammed, one reporter, he even put in an article saying we ought to bring back the whipping post. And he specifically, in fact, went to see Mike McDonald about this, and Mike McDonald said that would be great if they brought back the whipping post. We could bet on whether the first lash would draw blood. We could bet on how many lashes it would take before the guy screamed. The boodle board was something that everybody in Chicago grew up hearing about for a long time. Came up again in 1908. This is actually an article from long after just about everybody involved was dead, but they were still making payoffs for a lot of the bad deals that they had made. Now, in addition to this, Mike McDonald was married initially to a woman by the name of Mary McDonald, who at one point when the police tried to raid their gambling establishment, she shot the cop and took quite a lot of Mike McDonald's pull to get her off the hook. At that point, he got suspicious of Mary, sent her off to Paris with a priest to work as her chaperone, but then she ended up marrying the priest. Wife number 2 was a woman by the name of Dora Feldman, who got involved in an affair that went on for years and years with a crayon artist by the name of Victor Sharon. He was quite a lot younger than she was, but then eventually they got into a fight, and she ended up shooting him to death. Now, once it turned out that this affair had been going on, Mike died before the trial could really start, kind of died of a broken heart, but she was eventually acquitted. He had already paid for her defense by then. And he is now interred all by himself down at Mount Olivet Cemetery. This is an interesting one. You can really see right into there. I kept wanting to look and see if Mary was in there. But if she is in there, I couldn't find any data about it. Now, around the same time that these guys were operating, we had maybe the most audacious swindler we ever had in Chicago, operating down in what is now known as Streeterville in his honor. So here we've got the majestic Wanda Vista Tower. We will spin around from that. Down at Grand and McClurg, outside of Yolk, we've got this life-size statue of a guy by the name of Captain George Wellington Streeter. Now, Captain George Wellington Streeter, according to his version of the story, in 1888 crashed his houseboat onto the shore at Lake Michigan, which was then about where Michigan Avenue is now, and started charging people money to dump their garbage around his boat. Eventually, he created a 186-acre landfill, and being a bit of an eccentric, he decided that not only did he own this new land he had created, but that it was his own independent country of which he was the emperor. Now, that part is beyond dispute. Now, really, the city was already filling in that land to put in Lakeshore Drive. He had just forged a whole bunch of deeds and just kind of claimed squatters' rights. But it ended up taking the cops 30 years to get rid of the guy. And it wasn't just legal battles either. There were actually armed conflicts occasionally. He had a whole army of hobos that he had allowed to emigrate to his new country. At one point, they just put up a thing saying that he could no longer dock his boat there. So he just put it up on an automobile, an early automobile truck, and parked it. There weren't a lot of parking regulations at the time. So this is the cap in his automobile house. This may have been the first automobile house. The first, the people had mobile home carts before, but might have been the first one that was an automobile. And even though he was a complete con artist and swindler and even a bit of a murderer, people kind of loved the guy. When he eventually died, his funeral was a really big deal. He was still trying to battle with the city. They'd finally kicked him off of the land after about 30 years. But he is now buried up at Graceland Cemetery with his plug hat. He's kind of hard to find. He's up over by the rubble wall in an area not particularly well trafficked. I was kind of surprised he had a marked grave at all. But over the course of his dealings with the city between 1888 and the 1910s, of course, there was... Wrong button. There was the World's Fair in 1893, which people knew right away. With all these people coming into Chicago, especially from very small towns, we were going to be dealing with a lot of people who would be easy marks for con artists and pickpockets. And of course they were. The Chicago Journal put up this thing saying, now if Carter Harrison is elected president, criminals will be alive to the prospects. Every kind of murderer, swindler, pickpocket, etc. will make their way to Chicago. And in fact, most of them did. Now, the police and the criminal element kind of got together and agreed that they wouldn't really target people at the fair itself. But the fair wasn't the only thing that people did in Chicago. And in fact, there were an awful lot of people. There was a guy by the name of Barney Birch who will come up again, who was arranging payoffs to the police to keep pickpockets out of trouble, though the price of paying off a cop went way up in 1893. But this was a guy named Tom O'Brien who spent Chicago that year, the year of 1893, running the Gold Brick Con, which some people credit him with inventing. You would come up to a guy with what appeared to be a bit of a gold brick and say, I'm in a bit of a jam. I need money really fast. Now, I've got this gold brick here. This is worth about $1,000. But I'm in such a jam, I need $50 so fast, I can sell you this $1,000 gold brick for $50. Versions of it still go around today. Now, he has sometimes said that there was the inventor of this con. Some other people say it was his partner, Reed Waddle. But then in 1895 in a Paris hotel, he murdered Reed Waddle. His girlfriend, Annie Gray, over here on the right, hired a lawyer to show that it was second-degree, not first-degree murder, which spared him the guillotine. France was still using the guillotine as a method of execution up until the 1970s. He ended up dying on Devil's Island instead. But of course, if we're going to be talking about the World's Fair in Chicago, we've got to talk about the swindler I talk about the most, H.H. Holmes, the Devil in the White City guy. Often said to be America's first serial killer, really he wasn't anywhere close, but he was a swindler first and foremost. The legal archives are just full of boxes and boxes of court cases because he was a very audacious swindler, but frankly not the kind that didn't get caught. His favorite thing to do was buy stuff on credit and then not pay for it. He would just go sell it for cash. When the World's Fair was coming up, he knew that everybody was planning to get rich on this, so a lot of businesses were being way too free with their credit. Like, this is Bliss Bullard and Gormley. He went up to them with this letter saying, please deliver to H.H. Holmes Hardware for 701 and 703 63rd Street, the building later known as the Murder Castle, for which I will guarantee payment as the owner of the building. Yours truly, H.S. Campbell. He wrote letter after letter like this, all signed by H.S. Campbell. There was no H.S. Campbell, and for what I was able to tell, he got away with this about 60 times. That's just what I was able to find in the legal archives. He swindled the hardware company, the flooring company, the crockery company, the furniture company, everybody who might provide something for the construction of a new hotel space within a guy's building. In fact, he never even finished or opened the hotel. The whole thing was just a vehicle for swindling. He'd figured out right away you could make a lot more money pretending to operate a hotel than actually operating one. In fact, right in the middle of the fair, the third floor caught fire, the part that was supposed to be the hotel space, and immediately he tried to cash in at least 4 different insurance policies on it. Though the insurance companies, to their credit, were not fooled for 1 second. We'll jump ahead just a little bit in the years to talk about the Marquette Building. Over on the far right of this is the Marquette Building, which housed a lawyer who was the lawyer for a woman by the name of Gladys the Green. And Gladys the Green became fairly famous for renting a green car every day. She would rent a green car, dress all in green, including a green veil, a green dress, a green hat, and just ride around in the green car. And this is actually made the news quite a bit. People were starting to wonder, who is this famous green girl? She eventually came to be known as Gladys the Green. Well, really what she was doing was making a level of notoriety for herself so that she would attract attention, just enough attention, over in the hotels. And what she would do is she would go to the hotels, read the social registers, find out which rich guys were in town, attract their attention by being the famous girl in green, initiate minor affairs with them, and then blackmail them. About the only clue we had about this was that she would be going to her lawyer's office at the Marquette Building, After the scam was discovered, she disappeared from Chicago and disappeared from the record. I'm sure Gladys Green was not really her name, so I have no idea what became of her. But around this same time, we also had Yellow Kid Weil was still in operation. Now, right around the time of Gladys the Green, there was also the first real automobile murder. We've talked about this on the Unsolved Mysteries tour a few times. A guy by the name of Mr. Dove went to the Auditorium Hotel, which I thought I had a video of here, went to the old Auditorium Hotel, which was attached to the Auditorium Theater at Dan Canary's garage, and rented a car. Now, in those days, when you rented a car, nobody really knew how to drive, so you also got a chauffeur. The next morning, the chauffeur was found slumped over the steering wheel, dead in the car, way the hell out in Lamont. Now, at one point, Weil was said to be the actual Mr. Dove. This probably came about because he had gotten on a police officer's bad side. One thing he mentions in his book is there was a place called the House of All Nations run by a woman named Madame Cleo. And Madame Cleo was the mistress of a well-known police detective. And occasionally Madame Cleo would come to him saying, I want to gamble on some horses. Do you know any sure things? And he would say, why, of course I know a sure thing. Just give me $2,500 and I will bet it all on this horse that I know for a fact is going to win. And then the horse wouldn't win. And this was actually a scam that he got away with quite a lot because it's not illegal not to fix a horse race. But you can tick off the wrong people. That's probably what happened here. The police detective decided to get revenge, went and showed a picture of a yellow kid to a guy who worked the door at the Congress Hotel across the street from Dan Canary's garage and said, is this the guy? You saw Mr. Dove. This is what he looked like, right? This is definitely him. Right? All sorts of leading questions. And eventually the guy said, yeah, I think that does kind of look like the guy. Before he could be captured, Yellow Kid went with his lawyer to the hotel, went up and had some elaborate thing where they got the guy at the door to say, no, I've never seen that guy before in my life. And then they said, okay, you're going to come tell us that in more words. But horse race cons were one of his favorite things. He would also often meet up with people at Dan Redpath's Saloon, which was known as a real place for gamblers, swindlers, and con artists to hang out. And that was located right where our Architecture of Mysterious Chicago walking tours start, down here in Pickwick Place. Little nook of a street off of Jackson. And over he would pull that same scam, convincing of somebody that a horse was going to win, and then having it not win. And of course, he had never actually bet the money at all. He would say, no, don't do it at the office. We'll do it with my betting agent. Just give me all of the money. We'll place it in several small bets around several different agencies. That's how this stuff works. Now, he would also be known to operate occasionally at a place right about where the Green Mill is now. Right up around here, there was a place called Butterly's Buffet, which was a known resort for every swindler to just kind of hang out and talk shop. Also, of course, there were card games. Much of this was run by a guy by the name of Big Jack Strassnider, pictured over there on the top left. Now, Big Jack ran a number of gambling parlors that were not even real gambling parlors. They would just, when they had somebody that they wanted to dupe, they would hire several other con artists to go there and pretend to gamble. And they would play the old thing where they said, now, we happen to have this guy. Now, do you know where the Board of Trade building is? This is the current Board of Trade. But in those days, it would have been just to the left of that, one that looked about like this. Now, that's where the telegraph office is. We got a guy who normally works in Denver, but he's got to do a 2-week assignment here in Chicago, and one of his jobs is relaying all of the information from horse races. We've got it in with them. We'll go see him, and they would even have a guy out there in a visor who would say, oh, yeah, I'm here for 10 days, but this is a bad deal. I don't know if I want to get involved in this. They said, here's what we'll do. He's going to get the information first. He'll tell us before he wires it to the gambling halls. So we'll know who win. You're going to have a sure thing, put down all of your money. And of course, through various cons, they never quite made their money. You might notice this is exactly like what happens in The Sting. Not to do any spoilers. Yellow Kid wrote about this quite a bit. His ghostwriter tried to sue the Sting later on. Meanwhile, the early 1910s, right across the street from where Marshall Field is now, was a psychic parlor like the one advertised by billboard right next to Axl Rose's house, a boyhood home. Right in the middle here is this guy, James Ryan. He didn't dress up like with a turban or anything. He ran a fortune-telling parlor just looking like a regular businessman. And he was making quite a bit of money on this, just doing 50 or 60 fake seances a day. People would come in to ask to speak to their departed husband or something like that. But the real thing was, he wasn't really making too much money off of the readings themselves. The whole thing was just finding suckers, people who had just lost their husband and were trying to figure out what to do with his money. At that point, he would sell them horrible stock deals and keep most of the money for himself. It was really, the psychic stuff was just a cover for the stock market scam. Now, at the time, he was pulling in $6,000 to $10,000 a month in 1910s money, but part of the expenses was paying about $400 a month in bribes to the police. This became a bit of a scandal when it finally broke, and they asked him in this article, aren't any of the fortune tellers real? And he just kind of laughed. This was a pretty major trial. It's one of the weird ones that's kind of been forgotten. The way he was making all of these payoffs was through a guy by the name of Barney Birch, who came up again earlier for running pickpocketing scams and payoff rackets during the World's Fair. This was about 20 years later. Barney Birch was the guy who knew where all of the bodies were buried. He's another guy it's very weird that this guy is not better remembered than he is now. We've talked about him quite a bit on here. He comes up a lot in my gangster tour. At the time, he was so famous that he even went on vaudeville for a while, telling stories about his life. When he comes up now, it's really just because he spent his last years of his life as being kind of an elder statesman working with the Bugs Moran gang. But during the clairvoyant trials, some of the police were so nervous about who we might name that they actually tried to assassinate Barney Birch at a section of Randolph Street just west of Hair Trigger Block, an area known as the Rialto. They straight up tried to assassinate him. But he survived to fight another day and eventually joined the Bugs Moran gang. And meanwhile, we'll just cover briefly. This is Bughouse Square over by the Newberry Library. Right across the street from that was an alley called Tooker Place. There was an establishment in there by the name of the Dill Pickle. They would actually have cards saying, "I took her to Tooker Place." Maps still call this little alley Tooker Place occasionally. But inside of this was a place called the Dill Pickle Club. You had to literally go through a hole in the wall to get to it. But it was a place where it was what was known as a forum. People would just have debates there. This was during the 1920s. They were actually following the prohibition laws, about the only place that was. And they would have speakers every night in debates. Like one night they would have Victor Lendlar, the physiology and significance of flappers and cake eaters. Cake eater was like a male flapper. Or Dr. Ben Reitman, the famous birth control advocate, would give a speech on life and death in Bohemia. Or they'd have debates on, is sex better than jazz? Yellow Kid Weil was a regular speaker there. Sometimes he would go, usually under his own name, and the whole thing would be he's going to give a talk about how to swindle people. And then instead of just giving a talk, he would go and take the audience for $10. He told one story in his book that he and his friend would occasionally, just as a joke, pose as inventors there and say, "We're here to demonstrate our new invention. It's an instant chicken roaster." And they would take chicken and put it in this pan, put the pan on top of a covered pedestal, and say, "Now watch, in 30 seconds. And any rube should have known that underneath there was some guy swapping out the chicken they put there for one that was already roasted. But according to Weil, people would come up to him afterward and say, "I want to invest in this device." But even then, he didn't think he could even get away with stringing them along for that long. Captain Streeter came to speak there one time, too. And after his speech, one of his speeches, there was a terrific line. "Police say yellow kid ignores boobs." Now we're going to move down LaSalle Street here briefly. Around the same guy, one guy who worked with Barney Birch and the Yellow Kid quite a bit was a guy by the name of John W. Worthington. which really sounds like a great name for a swindler. Worthington was born down south. By the time he was 30, he was running 27 banks. In 1902, he did 2 years in Sing Sing for embezzling. Got to Chicago circa 1910, running banking companies, but he was also engaged in things like kiting checks, fencing stolen goods. There was a guy named Melville Reeves, the skyscraper burglar, who broke into every skyscraper in the Loop overnight and stole things like stocks and bonds and things that were hard to sell. So we'd have to take them to somebody over like John W. Worthington, who eventually they called the Wolf of LaSalle Street. Long before there was a Wolf of Wall Street, there was the Wolf of LaSalle Street, who was finally arrested. At the time, he had been fleecing investors, he had been stealing stocks and bonds, he had been taking money from the skyscraper burglar. There got to be quite this thing for his daughter. Alice said, "The world may call him Wolf, but I shall always call him Dad, and I love him." Until she found out that he hadn't left her very much money. But while these guys were doing things like that, there was also, over in the Majestic Theater building, was the office of a guy by the name of Leo Koretz. Now, Leo Koretz was friends with everybody. He knew all of the high rollers, whereas Worthington hung out with guys like Barney Birch and Yellow Kid Weil. Koretz hung out with people like Julius Rosenwald, all of the big business guys in Chicago. He told them that he was operating a thing called the Bayano River Syndicate that was selling land down in Panama in an area that he said was absolutely rich with oil. Now, he eventually started telling people they were going to get 60% annual returns on their investments. That's huge. It's more than Bernie Madoff was promising. Until it turned out that after several years, somebody actually went down to Panama to check out this land and found that nobody there knew anything about anybody named Leo Koretz, and there certainly wasn't any oil on the land. Eventually, he had made something like $20 million on this. That's $20 million in 1920s money. Be about $500 million today adjusted for inflation. And eventually died at the penitentiary, suicide by chocolate. He was a severe diabetic and he killed himself by eating a box of chocolates. He was recently the subject of a book called The Empire of Deception by Dean Job. It was a Ponzi scheme before Mr. Ponzi got that kind of scheme named after him. And of course, similar schemes, appear all over in Charles Dickens. But we'll just finish up a little bit here with the Yellow Kid. Yellow Kid also did some land schemes. He met a guy who said, my cousin is the county recorder of this place in Michigan, and he's got thousands of acres of land, but it's all basically worthless. So Yellow Kid said, well, buy it up from him. I got a plan. And the plan was, he didn't sell this land to people, he gave it to people. And he said, really, you're giving me a parcel of land in Michigan? And he said, yes, now you probably will want to go to the call the county recorder's office there and get the deed recorded, and you'll probably want to get an abstract drawn up. So he would give away this land that was worth about $1 an acre, but by getting involved with the county recorder who was jacking up his prices, he would also make about $40 or $50 per acre on worthless land by getting the deed recorded in the abstract drawn up, which again wasn't exactly illegal. It could get you beat up if the wrong people found out about it, found out that the land was just worthless, but no money had really changed hands. The deed recording was all done above board. Now, he lived to be over 100 years old. This is him in his very old age. He spent the last years of his life claiming to be reformed and living in a nursing home that is still standing up here on North Sheridan, almost to Evanston. Very close to the end of his life, his ghostwriter tried to sue the makers of The Sting for $50 million, because just about everything in that movie appears in the Yellow Kid's autobiography. And one final indignity to him, when he died, he owned a plot at Rose Hill Cemetery, but Rose Hill said they didn't want the likes of him buried there through various bits of legal trickery. I think his family might still be at Rose Hill. I haven't been able to determine for sure, but Yellow Kid himself was cremated and is buried in an unmarked grave, apparently unmarked, somewhere here at Archer Woods Cemetery. Of course, for all, the cons that people play now have changed a little bit since then. Some of them, like the gold brick scam, still go around all the time. But of course, people are still selling things like snake oil. They don't call it snake oil anymore. They'll sell you like vitamin supplements. That's become a really big one in recent years. I had a discussion a while ago whether we should consider NFTs a scam. And it kind of depends on how they sell it to you. If they tell you what it is, they're putting your name attached to this piece of art with via math problem, then it's okay. If they tell you it's going to be worth a fortune forever and keep going up and up, they might be getting into the range of scams here. It's very similar to that thing where you can buy have a star named after you. And you don't necessarily get it recognized by any astronomical bodies. The place is up front. We will list your name as the namesake of this star in the International Star Registry. It shouldn't take much to see that anybody else could publish their own star registry, and that astronomical bodies don't really use this, so you get exactly what you pay for. It's not necessarily a scam. NFTs are just kind of the same thing, only people keep telling you it's going to go up and up and up in value, which, maybe it will, who knows. But anyway, just always, if something sounds too good to be true, remember, it almost certainly is. And no supplements will actually keep you alive. Just the other day, a guy was telling me, I don't need to get vaccinated. The important thing is cultivating a killer immune system. That's why I take this and this and this. I'm like, man, some supplement dealer really saw this dude coming. All right, let me plug some of the upcoming events. Thursday night, bringing back one of our classics, antique serial killers in Chicago history. Again, we tend to say that H.H. Holmes is America's first serial killer, but really he was not even the first in Chicago, probably not by a long shot. Then Sunday, a week from today, one of my favorite virtual ones to do, Rose Hill Cemetery in autumn. It is absolutely beautiful at Rose Hill Cemetery in autumn, so we got some great film footage of a virtual version of the tour, and that'll be coming right up. All right, so should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, anything like that for the cold weather, cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago can hook you up with whatever you need. And with that, I will put the Benny Goodman back on. And we will just hang out like we always do. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. And here is Benny Goodman coming to you live from the Joseph Urban Room in the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago in 1936.
And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Cindy, I'll see what I can do about the autumn temperatures. Yeah, Karen, I wouldn't say pet rocks are a scam. Everybody knew what they were getting with a pet rock. Essential oils, it depends on how they sell it. If they say it's going to smell good, you're probably in okay shape. If you expect it to cure what ails you, less so. The same thing with Beanie Babies. It was only a scam if somebody genuinely tried to assure you this was definitely a great investment. Thanks, Marita. Thanks, Brad. I love my curtains. Matches the cat bed down over here. Hey, Maria. Speaking of cats, they're gonna be showing up any second here. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, Laura, I watched the Beanie Baby special the other day. I didn't realize that the whole collecting thing started in Naperville. Now, the MyPillow guy, I think the pillows are reasonably decent pillows. They work about as advertised. It's just all the other stuff the guy's involved in that's a total that's a total con. Hey, Miles. Oh yeah, Miles is just waiting her turn. Yeah, before we knew that the MyPillow guy was completely nuts, we did have one of the pillows. I thought it really sucked, personally. Some people seem to like them. But I almost got in trouble on the Patty Vasquez show. I was calling the My Pillow guy a creepy Ned Flanders wannabe without realizing he was one of the sponsors. No regrets. I'm gonna go fix this curtain again.
Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Oh, Helena, that's rough. A lot of people did, though. A lot of people paid a lot more than that for Beanie Babies. Alright, now the cats are just waiting very patiently right here because they know this music coming back on means that it is time to jump. Ready, Miles? It's off to a slow start today. There we go. You want to jump too? You're standing there waiting for it. Now when it's time to jump. Up high where they can really see you, huh? You guys have all got the message here. I'll at least make this smaller. Oh, you got it.
Down the Harlem Way, they're all trucking.
Come on, there you
Coming
go.
on to tell you all about it. Trucking.
Hey, you want to jump too? You guys drove me utterly insane this morning when I was trying to make oatmeal. But now that the camera's on. Ever since I got this toy, they won't even let me sit at the desk anymore. Oatmeal, Kristen. Oh, I was making, you can't get opium anymore.
We had to have someone new, a dance to do out here in Harlem. So, someone got it truckin'. As soon as the news got round, the folks downtown came up to Harlem.
I think Ronnie still has plenty of Beanie Babies as well. But she was never an investor. There's a Morton Salt Girl Funko. I do kind of want that. Ronnie has a lot of Funkos. Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, this one is called a cat catcher. The cat dancer is the thing with little bits of jute twine on the end. They love those too.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Now, one rule I would go by for buying collectibles as an investment is if people are buying something as an investment, it's probably not going to be a good investment. Like, the reason comic books from the 1930s are valuable is people didn't buy them as an investment, they all got thrown away eventually. Comics from the 90s, when people were buying them as investments, are worth crap. Baseball cards, another thing. Once baseball cards became collectible and people bought them as investments, the value just plummeted. Good catch, Miles. You gonna take me for a walk now? He's very good at catching this thing. He'll take me for walks. Taking me for a walk? Whoa! Yeah, I cannot sit at my desk anymore. Because he'll be climbing up me and climbing over the computer. It's a big one for you? Big jump? Okay, you're getting tuckered out, huh? Alright. Let's get you one more time, you got it? Alright. Climb up to the roof? I don't have the roof here. Oh, was the Morton Salt roof? I always tell my school groups that's the salt mines where they send the bad children to work.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Buddy. Good jumping today. Not your best, but pretty good. Do. See Priya still stationed on the couch back there. Catch your troubles by the toe. If it hollers, let it go. Let it fly away. High and low, hear it everywhere you go. Any time of day. Valley sings it. Wise men wings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. Hey Debbie, just tea for me over here. Then yes, there was. Take just about any traditional melody, there was probably a racist version of it at one point. Then on the internet it'll be said as the original version. It's usually not the original. Or eeny meeny in general goes back a really long time. Various counting out rhymes similar to it go back literally centuries.
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Madhouse.
She is up to something over here. I don't know what, I just hear her. Now, Carol Benny performed all over the place, of course. This the recording I've got, I usually try to do Chicago recordings for these shows. Brad, this is on archive.org, which is also where they now have 1,400 issues of the National Police Gazette, one of the most entertainingly ridiculous magazines published in the Victorian days. So if you need me, that's kind of where I'll be. Oh, look what else is on this deck. It's Charlotte trying to get into my liquor cabinet. It's nice to run into that now and then. We miss Charlotte. Oh yeah, I'm not driving anywhere today. The roads are a mess. Even though it's not as, tomorrow might be better. Except that I think tomorrow is going to be, yeah, high of 14 tomorrow. I was going to make me up some Tom Yum soup. Hey, Miles. We just got like a thin coating of ice, I think. But that's all it takes. Thin coatings are harder than like a big chunky ice. Miles. Don't try to climb me, baby. You gotta be careful with your claws. You wanna do TikTok? Wanna do TikTok Kitty? We were just looking at an old Charlotte video. Remember, Charlotte used to do TikTok Kitty. Here you go. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. Charlotte loved doing that. Most cats actually seem to enjoy that. It's never been Miles's favorite, but he'll put up with it for a bit. Thanks, Carlene. We'll see you next time. We do these every morning at 10 o'clock. There's a short one. And then Thursdays and Sundays, Thursday nights and Sunday mornings, we do full-length presentations.
Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
Miles. Priya, would you like to try TikTok? Here you go. There you go. Alright, we're gonna try this, okay? Tick tock, 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 tick tock. Yeah. You like it? Yeah, she seemed to enjoy that. Oh, hey, Ollie. Rebel used to have a cat named Ollie.
In Chicago, this is the National Broadcasting Company.
I gotta rewind the Benny. Ah. I gotta hit play having rewound the Benny. There we go. Miles is presently just hanging around on the desk chair. Oh yeah, Priya and Miles are now totally partners in crime.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing with all.
And she'll still kind of dart away if you try to pick her up while she's up to something. But when she's often up to something. Hey, Chiaro. Okay, family on the group chat. I'm not good at word games. I do not play them. I'm not good at them. You don't have to include me in the Wordle narrative. Yeah, here we go, buddy. You want to come back up? Yeah. With all my heart, I say I love you dearly, for I am yours sincerely, with all my heart. All I hear, what a while and wherefore, you're all I ever care for, with all my heart. Helen Ward, ladies and gentlemen. You're stumped, Kristen. I'm getting pictures of their scores, but I cannot decipher them. These are just like a bunch of green, yellow, and black boxes. That's not numbers or words. Boxes and colors are scores. The Book of Boba Fett's a TV show. Hot means cool, bad means good, and best bud has nothing to do with flowers. Apparently, if I sent today's results to everyone, it would give away the answer. I do not see how. Fun game, I'm sure. Rebecca, the Boba Fett series is off to a pretty good start. Yeah, these things are like, it's like cemetery section numbering. Apparently there's a button to exclude myself from this narrative. Oh, but it doesn't work. It's grayed out. Pretty sure I could set it to hide alerts earlier. I'm currently sharing my location, so it doesn't help. I'll figure it out. Okay. Velveteen. Now, I've never been great at word games. I've solved maybe 2 crossword puzzles in my whole entire life.
And they all loved it. They all loved those fast ones when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
Someone in the chat is an android? That doesn't sound right. Ah, Miles. Alright. Do you want to play Wordle, Miles? You'd probably be better at it than I am. Everybody, all this talk of soup is making me hungry. So, I'm going to go ahead and plug the upcoming events one more time. So, this Thursday night, bringing back one of our classics, antique serial killers in Chicago history, already generated about 10 times as much interest as I had on this one. Then, next Sunday, a week from today, at 10 o'clock, we will be doing Rose Hill Cemetery in Autumn. I think this is the only time I've run that one virtually. But, alright everybody, thanks a lot for joining me, and of course we do morning mini tours every day at 10 o'clock, except on Sundays when it's full length, and Fridays at 6:30 on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page. You can catch me doing Whiskey and a Cookie. So alright everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours, saying stay safe, stay strong, stay warm. If you can, try to stay home. But most important, stay spooky everybody.